welcome. Thank you for tuning in. We're live with evangelist Tom Scarella, and we're going to have a great time. We're talking about Charlie Kirk's call in reclaiming the truth in politics. There's a number of points we're going to touch on. And I want to get started by, as people jump on here, just want to say, don't forget to invite people, share the link, and drop us a comment. We would greatly appreciate that. So I'm going to get started, and I'm going to throw this one right at Evangelist Tom, and he can answer this. So the first point that I want to touch on is, and again, I want your opinion, Tom, is when it comes to your right to say something, if you've given it away, can you get it back again?
Well, historically, we know no country has ever gotten it back. That's why it's it's a fallacy when people say, like, especially a lot of young adults will say, well, we've never tried socialism here. Well, every country that's tried it has never been allowed to go back. So all, whether it's UK or all of Europe or South American countries or Central American countries, every single country that has quote unquote tried and gave up their rights. Like, I just heard a statistic that 30 or 35 years ago, somewhere around there, the UK gave up their guns. And once they gave their guns up, now they're arresting Christians for praying in their car silently under their breath for an abortion clinic, praying for the people to turn their hearts. Literally, policemen are arresting people saying, what were you praying? First off, we need to know what you were praying. And so what that tells you is once you give up those rights, you never get them back.
You never get it back again.
No,
well,
no.
And that's a part of, I'll just add this. Obviously I knew who Charlie Kirk was. I appreciated his stance on, proclaiming Jesus, and his boldness to do so.
Yes. I
think I know more about him after he's passed than before the time. And I don't think I'm the only one. I think that's happened with a lot of people. Right. There's so many people out there. I appreciated what he did at the colleges, especially because I know how needed it is in those areas. And so I have a great respect for that. But, the reason I'm bringing this up is not because, we're a part of his organization or anything like it, but it's just the fact of, for such a long time, I felt that a lot of Christians would only go down the train of, we're going to speak about Jesus and we're going to speak about the gospel and we're going to keep it central to Jesus, but we're never talking about politics. And so, but it's like you said, it's a fallacy.
And not only that, Pastor, to be honest with you, 250 years ago, if they did not speak about God in politics, we would never have had "In God We Trust" on all of our money. So all of our currency has God. We're the only country in the world that has God's name on our currency.
Right.
And so we would never have had that. We would never have had the right to freedom of religion. That would never have happened. But because the founding fathers knew these problems they had in England, they didn't want it to follow them here.
Absolutely.
And now the communist socialist machine is trying to train our children up in the way they shall go. So when they're older, they won't depart from it. And so they're literally indoctrinating our kids.
Absolutely.
And so.
Well, and one of the things too, people don't take this in consideration, but the persecution of the believers or the disciples in the early church had to do with politics. People don't want to, they think, well, no, it's because you were Christian and they hated Christianity. But if you back up, people forget quickly that the note or the board above Jesus's head when he was crucified was called King of the Jews.
Yeah, that's right. Political.
He was crucified for calling himself King of the Jews. He was in constant conflict with the political leaders. people don't realize that the system of the day, people's like, oh, were religious leaders. The religious leaders was also political leaders.
Yeah.
Those were the Pharisees. They were the court system of the day. So people don't know this because they're so ill-educated scripturally. But you know, those are just basic scriptural facts.
Well, and you think of two other countries that you bring in. Number one, Nazi Germany, way back in the 30s. The Christians were told, Romans 12, just be quiet, say nothing, just comply, just submit to your government. And they twisted that I think it's Romans 12, and they twisted that scripture so that they would silence the church. And that's where people like Dietrich Bonhoeffer had to be raised up, even all the way to his death. He was lobbying for the Jewish people being murdered. And it wasn't only Jewish people, it was homosexuals, it was people of color, people of different countries as well. And we were there. We went and we were in Poland last year and saw the death chambers. And they have literally giant boards on the wall of all the people that were killed. And again, remember, they were killed under socialism. And because the church had been silenced. And you think about Venezuela. Look at Venezuela. There's so little justice there in Venezuela and so little food under that socialistic mindset. They're eating dogs and cats. That's how poor they were.
Absolutely.
Eating their animals.
You know, and I can comment on it. Obviously, you know, most people
You
know
grew up in it. Yeah.
born and raised in South Africa. And, you know, what we've been exposed to, you know, my wife was born in America. She's from Michigan originally. And
two socialist countries.
yeah. So
I'm joking.
she's in the background laughing. So yeah. So yeah, you know, like people who haven't lived in it doesn't know what it looks like. And
Right.
it's like you said in the beginning, they're like, well, let's try it. But once you've tried it, you ain't going back again.
No, you'll
You know,
never get those
you need
friends.
something very, very radical before anything changes. Extremely radical.
See, this is what was sold to the American people 75 years ago. Let's try Social Security. Let's try a taste of socialism. Let's try Social Security. Now, where's the money 75 years later? Nobody knows. It's all gone. All the money is gone. Now the money is gone. Oh, where did it go? Well, the politicians used it to pay for illegals, and they paid for this and they paid for that. For the last 75 years, that was how it was sold to the American people. Just like many people don't know this, but even a federal income tax, you know when that came in? Under FDR. Franklin Delano Roosevelt brought that in to just pay off the money they owed for World War II. He said, listen, it's only a 2-year tax federally. And he said, it's just for 2 years. Now here we are. What is it? 80 years later, and we're still paying it. But they promised us it's just 2 years, just 2 years.
Absolutely.
So once you give it up.
I want to comment on something. It's interesting that you brought this up. I was kind of thinking about throwing it in when you brought up, you said Romans 12, but it's actually Romans 13. 13 says the same thing. I'll just pull it up on my phone.
Please.
And I want to pull this up because I really believe this is one of the most misinterpreted scriptures. Because most people doesn't read the chapter. They read a verse and they focus on one verse instead of reading the context of what it's saying. So they read one verse, and so then it's easy to interpret whichever way you want.
Right.
So they read verse 3. For rulers are not a terror to good works, but to the evil would you then not be afraid of the power? Do that which is good, and you shall have praise of the same. Verse 4 says, for he is a minister of God. So, first of all, you need to ask yourself, is politicians really ministers of God?
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying? So,
Yes.
you know, are you spiritualizing this, or is this literally the truth? You understand what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
for he is the minister of God to you for good, but if you do that which is evil, be afraid, for he bears not the sword in vain, for he is the minister of God, a revenger to execute wrath upon him that does evil. Verse 5, wherefore you must needs be subject, not only to wrath, but also for your conscience sake. For this cause we pay ye tribute also. So see, this is where the confusion comes in, because it brings in the subject of tribute. But you have to remember that when Jesus spoke about tribute, he says, pay tribute to whom tribute is due, and honor to whom honor.
Right.
So he was using tithe and tribute as a parallel.
Yes.
So that's why they're using this comparison.
Yep, exactly. Because verse 7, render therefore to all who are due taxes to whom taxes are due, customs to whom customs, fear
And
to whom
honor to whom
honor. Honor. Right.
Yeah. So that's what he's quoting here. You understand? So
this is what Hitler used, that same scripture.
Yes.
He used it on the Christian people to be quiet, and then he began to dehumanize. I just heard a whole thing about it. What he started with, the recipe, the socialist recipe, is to dehumanize. You dehumanize your enemy, and then eventually, when you execute them, you've already dehumanized them. And
Yes.
that's how he did it with the 6 million Jews.
Yes.
He did it with dehumanizing them. So what did the left do with Charlie Kirk? They dehumanized him. What have they been doing all these years with Donald Trump? Prior to 2016, he was given awards for Jesse Jackson said he did more for the African American community than any other person ever in American history. And in less than 12 months later, he was the most racist man, just a raven racist, you know. And it's like, how did that happen, you know?
Well, and the reason I brought up Hebrews 13 is, if the interpretation, hear me out, if the interpretation is the government is an authority, it's very different from the interpretation is the minister of God is the highest power.
Right. Right.
So though this is what it's saying, it says the minister of God is the highest power. You understand what I'm saying? So you can't say, well, now the politician is the minister of God. So then where does the minister of God fit in? You follow what I'm saying?
Right. Exactly.
So you've got to read that context. It doesn't say that. You know, and so to me, that's the biggest lie and that's crept in so many churches. I know how many, you know, we consider ourselves, of course, like Pentecostal, if you will, or spirit-filled, if you will. I know many Pentecostals that say, well, you know, that's got nothing to do with, you know, like that's just, you know, be subject unto the government, be subject unto the government. But they learned that from the Catholic Church.
Yep, exactly. And who are the ones that were flying the Nazis out by the dozens during the Nuremberg trial? The Catholic Church.
Yeah.
They hid them in Venezuela. That's why many people believe that Hitler was never killed. They believe that he just lived out his days in Venezuela. I don't know if I believe that or not, but many of the
Nazis, what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, that many of the Nazis were flown out because of the Catholics' interpretation of Romans 13. Now it sounds horrific, but look at the amount of people that cheered and were thrilled that Charlie Kirk could be murdered in public. And now what did they do? Now they're like, well, maybe that's not so great to say. So let's say this. He never was killed. He set himself up. It was all
it's well, and here's the other thing. So, and this is where I believe people, you know, when do we draw the line, and when do we start speaking out, and when do we, stand for the truth is the second point I want to get to is, and you can tell me, but when has the media become the standard for truth?
Right, the barometer. Yeah.
When like at what point did that happen?
Right.
So now the media determines what's true and what's not true. I mean, that's just, I mean, if you switch on the media at any given point in time, I mean, how many contradictions are there?
Oh,
Within 5 minutes, you just scroll through these short videos, political videos. They flip on your phone on whether it be Google, forgive me, YouTube, or Facebook, whatever platform. You just flip through them, and there's political videos. I mean, it's like the one after the other. It's like 5 contradictions in less than 10 minutes.
Well, 5 years ago now, it was not illegal, but every social media outlet would shut your channel down if you mentioned COVID-19 came from a lab in Wuhan, China.
Yeah.
And they swore that that was the truth, that it actually came from another source, and that is not true. And they actually even silenced the president. So YouTube just settled yesterday $24.5 million because they silenced the president from bringing out truth. Zuckerberg had to do the same with Facebook. I think it's close to 100 million. The New York Times had to pay him back. And that's just one person. I mean, I forget how many thousands of resources were trying to say contrary, or even Hunter Biden's laptop.
Yeah.
The media shut that stuff.
All kinds of stuff like that. I mean, and so I actually, if you don't mind, I have a video. I was not sure if I was going to play it or not, but this was in I believe it was in 2022, the end of 2022. It was, well, the second half of the summer anyways, of 22. So this is a while ago that I recorded this video. I actually have it on our YouTube channel. I'm going to have them just play that one portion. We can play it a little later, but I wanted them to play that video. I spoke and I said the following: there will be judgment and retribution for the media.
Wow.
I said that back then. I said there will be judgment and retribution for the media. And I mean, this is I just filmed it with my cell phone outside. And, I should have probably just, put it up somewhere else. But you don't play the whole video. Just play that one portion. It's around the 1 minute mark. If you can find that, just play that for me.
Overturned and justice will be served, not just to its politicians, but especially in the area of media. Starting in the United States, media will see justice. Justice will be served for corruption in media, starting there, and then politicians, right? So I just saw these revolts. So I saw these nations and I saw these revolts, and I believe it's because people is about.
Thank you. Thanks. I just wanted to play that portion.
Awesome.
That's great. Throw the link in there if people want to watch it and go check out when it was, because it's on the channel. So
it's awesome. Oh, there's 2 politicians right there.
Yep, there's 2 politicians right there. They came on by accident. Yep,
oh,
that's it.
I'm telling you. You know what? I'll tell you a funny story regarding politics. I'll tell you. When I was a kid, I was about 9 years old, and I loved professional wrestling. Brother, I loved it. I had the magazines, and I just followed it. I was so, this is back when Hulk Hogan, and he was getting ready to fight this great big guy. His name was Jerry Blackwell. And so my stepfather said, I'll take you to the match. It's, not that far from us. So I went and I cheered and I shouted and I screamed, and they were yelling at each other and they broke a chair over each other's head. And when they left, Pastor Jaco, they left out the back. Well, it was at this school auditorium in Western Minnesota. And so that was for the championship. So we got in the car, and my stepdad said, I'm not going to fight the traffic in the front. I know a way around the back. We'll go out and we'll drive out. I said, okay. So we drive out. God's honest truth. Both men are getting into a car together. We just saw them fighting. And they got into a car together, laughing their heads off. And I never wanted to watch wrestling again. And now, fast forward, it's the same thing with politicians. In front of the microphone, they can shout and scream and holler at each other. But at the end of the day, they're all getting
They're all
paid.
friends.
Yeah, they're all friends.
Yeah, absolutely. So so let's see. So here's another one. So we kind of spoke about, biblical stance on politics in the church. We spoke about some practical things, but I want to hear your view on. I have my view, but I want to hear your view. Why did Charlie Kirk's assassination awaken so many people?
I think what it did is it showed the end result of this dehumanizing that I was talking about before. And the dehumanizing has not stopped. It's actually escalated. Those who dehumanized him never apologized. Nothing. And I think that what it did was those who had even a little bit of a soft conscience, is it just convicted their conscience, and they realized, listen, we have to do something drastic here, because the end result is always going to be the murder of that voice, of any other thought. That's why they can scream tolerance all day long. But at the end of the day, there's no tolerance for anyone with a different voice.
Okay.
And so it literally is the most intolerant group there is.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. What I would say, though, and on top of that is, it's also, to me, it's a revealing, not so much of what's going on in the world. Yes, it's awakened people in the world and all that. But if you think about it, Charlie Kirk's work in campuses and in the world, in reaching people with the gospel, has been phenomenal. Like, it's just
like a mini revival going on.
The size of the impact, or the magnitude of the impact that he's had, is phenomenal. I mean, it's insane. It's like, yes, he was more like a figure that tried to restore justice or righteous living, and certain political standards. But in that, he really reached people with the gospel. I mean, how many people got saved just because of his videos? Yeah. Not just after his assassination, but before the time as well. To me, it's not so much a revealing of the world, but a revealing of the church.
Yes. And I think just like COVID did in 2020, it revealed who was the real church and who was just in it for money and popularity. And you saw, it was like a dividing line instantly. And many people who sided, with, the government and money and all of that different stuff. And grandma's going to die if you have church. If you go to that funeral, brother, you are going to kill my grandma, And those who said, listen, use your cognitive brain, come and think together. The scripture says we are still to gather together until the coming of the Lord. The scripture says, do not forsake the gathering together. And the government stepped in and overreached its boundaries. They knew they were breaking the what am I looking? Not Bill of Rights, but the Constitution. They broke our Constitution, and they knew it, and they didn't care. And rather than the church say, hey, listen, I was shocked. In fact, the biggest shocker to me, Pastor, was that Pentecostal churches, even faith churches, had no faith during that time. And who rose up the most? shockingly, was many of some evangelical groups. That's what blew my mind. Now here we are, 5 years later, the same thing. Who are the ones that are speaking out against the injustice the most? Are some of these evangelical churches, and many of the Pentecostals
Zip.
didn't say a word.
Yeah. Well, and and that's as well where I believe that a lot of this. So, like for example, I say this to our staff all the time, is that it's great if that people want to know about all these spiritual things, right? And so obviously we're Pentecostal, or are we typical Pentecostal, denominational Pentecostal? No, but we're Pentecostal. And so it's great that people want to know more about spiritual things, and but at the same time, 90% of what Christians need is practical advice.
Yes, I agree, brother, 100%. And the sad thing is yeah.
Go ahead, sorry.
No. I was just going to say, many of the same churches in 2020 spoke at length about George Floyd.
Yeah.
Are the same churches that say, oh, we only talk about Jesus, we don't talk about things.
But they spoke about Floyd.
They spoke about a man who broke every possible. He was he beat up a pregnant woman to the point where she lost her baby. He had counterfeit money, a drug dealer, a drug addict, and that's who they glorified. And here's a man who was faithful to his wife, faithful to his children, 32 years old, and murdered for just free speech, and just said, hey, let's have a discussion. Let's just talk about different things and let's reason here. And no, we cannot glorify. And here's a man, it'd be one thing if he was just a nominal Christian. Okay. Absolutely. But here's a man that was not a nominal Christian. This guy, he went to the number one apologist in America and asked to learn how to defend the gospel better in his meetings.
Well, let me say it from my point of view. People, of course, if you pastor a church, you have to take in consideration if you say certain things that is along political lines. Doesn't matter if you say nothing about a specific political party, but if it anywhere reflects something along political lines, some people will leave.
Yeah.
They will leave. I know that. Every preacher that's been in ministry for more than 5 years should know that. If they haven't come to realize that yet, the IQ is probably lower than it should be.
Yeah.
So everybody knows that.
But if you're not going to speak about Charlie Kirk, who are you going to speak about?
Well, and that's just it, right? So now the point is that, okay, so now I'm not speaking about politics. What am I building the church with?
Right.
What am I building the church with? Am I building it with a bunch of lukewarm people that won't do any? Those people that won't evangelize.
Right.
They want to hang out all the time.
Right.
They want to love on everybody all the time, which is great. We need the love of God. But at the same time, is there a conviction that happens that turns people's hearts around? So, does that happen? Is that what you're building your church with? Or is it just, you have a church full of people? You can have a church full of people, but a church without God. That's my big problem that I have with some of these people that won't go along political lines.
Well, you know who Mark Driscoll is, Pastor Mark Driscoll. Yes. He resigned his church a couple of weeks ago. He told the story. I just listened to it right before the podcast. And he told the story. He said, I was praying. My wife and I spent time praying together. And he said, boom, God spoke something to me. He said, I sat up. And he said, God spoke to me immediately, give your resignation to your church. He said, we weren't praying about that, but God told him to resign his church. And then he said to his wife, he said, did God say something to you? And she said, he did. But she said, he said the weirdest thing. She said, we need to resign immediately. And so then he realized, okay, something's strange here. So they put their heads together. They went and they met with the board and they resigned. As they resigned, one of the board members pulled him aside and said, listen, I'm glad you resigned. And so Mark Driscoll said, why? And he said, because the majority of the board members said, let's spread a rumor that the pastor is having an adulterous affair. It will kick him out of the pulpit for 12 months, and then there'll be an investigation. It'll come to nothing. But by then, he'll be out of the pulpit, and he won't speak about these political things. And this just happened, brother, not even a week ago. Is that crazy? They and this board member that told him said 3/4 of the board said this is what they wanted. And they would rather spread a lie and destroy the rest of his life to preserve this seeker-sensitive church. And but because Mark Driscoll was very open.
But I'll speak for ourselves, right? So people's like, well, why do you? I've spoke since the day we landed in Wisconsin. I've spoken about it.
Yeah.
You know, right throughout COVID, not just about COVID, but all these socialistic things. I mean,
yes,
I have offended a lot of people with it. And the first thing they would say, without mentioning a particular political party, if you bring up socialism, the first thing they say is the following: oh, you're anti-democracy, because they vote for the party that stands for, quote, democracy, right? And not that I am anti-democracy, but, you know, why would they assume that without me bringing that party's name up?
Well, and many people...
You follow what I'm saying? So they already know that that is the case, meaning their association, their alliance is with socialism. They know it, they wouldn't admit it.
Well, and you know, just like a lot of people know, if they spread a lie enough, people will believe it. For example, the school system keeps telling our kids, we live in a democracy. We don't live in a democracy. We live in a republic.
Correct.
That's why when we swear to the Pledge of Allegiance, we do not say, and to this democracy I stand. It's to the republic. Yeah. Yep. So we don't have a democracy. Because if we did have a democracy, if the democracy said everyone with blonde hair gets killed, well, that's what the democracy says. So the vast majority say that. Okay, so the democracy rules. So we don't have that. We have a republic.
Correct.
And that's why the founding fathers founded a republic, not a democracy.
Absolutely. I 100% agree with that. Yeah. So, yeah, I agree with it 100%.
But I think I think this whole Charlie Kirk thing awakened so many people, even atheists and people living in all kinds of alternative lifestyles of homosexuality to you name it. I've seen so many testimonies where they just break down weeping because they knew the man had so many death threats.
And he kept going.
And so many people said to him, listen, you need to have a full bodyguard staff. Now, why is that? If the one side is that much democracy and peace and, everybody, all are welcome. And
well, he just said it. I mean, brother, you watch the video. I mean, minutes before he got shot. What did he say? This is the party of violence. That's what he said minutes before.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, see? Minutes before the assassination. He said it. This is the party of violence.
Yeah, it is. And that whole socialist side, it's extremely violent. I think I read somewhere that of the last 7 mass shootings in America, all 7 of them were Democrat socialists. Yeah, all 7 of them. And most of them were transgender. Correct. Now, we just came from DC. We were in DC and we were invited for a couple of different things. And the one thing we were invited for was a closed door session. It was a briefing on cognitive warfare in America. And every single one of those people that were on this panel, they had to have special, what's the word? They had to have special protection because all of its foundations are in Russia. All of the foundations are in Russia. And so here's the thing, okay, not to divert us, but this is kind of just emboldening this whole thing, is what they found is that the Russian FSB group knew that to bring in a sleeper cell to assassinate somebody with a voice of freedom and a voice of peace and a voice for God, they would have to send in a sleeper to kill them. And they said, okay, it's too much money to train somebody for all of this. So what they decided was through the media, they would break people down mentally. And they would keep releasing a certain amount of words. And so there's already a group of the public that are bipolar. Okay, so if you have a bipolar person, in other words, their mental defenses are down, number one. Number two, anyone with transgender, that's transgender, has gender dysphoria. And it's scientifically proven that someone with gender dysphoria, the part of their brain is fractured. There's a fracture. And so just like the movie that Denzel Washington did in 2004, it's called The Manchurian Candidate, they would say a certain sentence and bang, it would trigger somebody. So they said the way they started was always with dehumanizing. They would dehumanize the president. Dehumanize, dehumanize, dehumanize. He needs to be taken out. He needs to be killed. Something needs to happen. He needs to go away. All of this stuff. And then what happens is those words go out and it hits you and I, and it just bounces off. But somebody who is with gender dysphoria or somebody with bipolar, it affects them mentally different. And they become a sleeper cell. And this is why the left has used this harsh language. And they have been advised. We were invited to the briefing. It was so secretive, brother, they could not put it on YouTube. They couldn't.
It's crazy.
It's all from Russia. It all comes from the FSB in Russia, and it works its way through socialism. And anyone with a conservative voice of freedom and guns, or anything to do with freedom and religion and stuff like that, it's a voice they have to silence. Because once people start rationalizing, they say, well, yeah, that's a good idea. And then, no, we have to shut that voice down. That's why you can't go on any college campus in America without guards and to speak like this.
Absolutely.
You'll be assaulted.
So I just want to say this, Brooke, if you can, at the end of this whole thing, just play that, if you can find that Mark Driscoll video and just play it, that'd be great.
And I'll share something with you I've never shared. I don't know if it's a good idea or not. I'll ask Grace. She did this. So, okay. So, I was in one end of the house. Grace was in the other. God spoke to us both, said, you're released. You need to resign immediately. And God told me a trap is set. He didn't tell Grace that. So she came in. She's like, God just spoke to me. I was like, God just spoke to me. And I said, what did you hear? She said, we're released. I said, I heard we're released. And that trap was set. So we walked away. Didn't defend ourselves. Took 18 months. Didn't do social media. Didn't do public ministry. Just wanted to heal up and be with my family and get them into safety in a very dangerous season of our life. And so during that time, I met with some of my critics and enemies, one-on-one or small group, people that had been friends, people who claimed to be Christians, some who were pastors, some who still are pastors. And I asked them, I said, God told me a trap was set. So I asked them, I said, do you know what that might be? And these people that we had known said, yeah, the nuclear option was we were going to accuse you of adultery. This was at Panera, multiple meetings at Panera. It's like, you guys discussed accusing me of adultery. I was like, you know that's not true. I've been faithful to my wife my whole life. I adore my wife. I love my wife, and she loves me. We've been faithful to each other. We've been open our whole marriage about any struggles we have had because we know that every married couple has some hardship to go through, and we have never been dishonest, but we have never done that. We've never done anything remotely like that. They said, yeah, that's why we kept it as the nuclear option. I was like, to get me what? They said, to get you out of the pulpit. They said, because we knew that if we accused you of adultery and enough of us signed the open letter, that ultimately there would be such a media firestorm that you would have to exit ministry, exit preaching God's word for probably a year while a full investigation was done.
Tom, one more thing, because I want to kind of wrap it up in a few minutes.
Yeah.
So, number one, what is the purpose of government? So
Well,
I want to hit 2 points. One of this is, what is the purpose of government? If you can just explain, like biblically, what is the purpose of government? And then also, constitutionally, what is the purpose of government?
Yeah, so I mean, the purpose of government is to protect the people of that land, or it's not members, but it's what's the word I'm looking for? In other words, we need to protect citizens. There's the word I'm looking for. And so it's to protect its citizens. And so for centuries, every country has known you have to protect its borders. Why? Because you're protecting its citizens. So the number one purpose is to protect its citizens. Number two is to provide certain amount of freedoms and stuff like that for its citizens. And in particular, our government, it was originally set up to leave us alone. That was the goal of the United States government. And that was what was never heard of in the world before. That's why people from Europe and Asia and Africa and all over different continents, Australia, they came together and they said, let's just leave people alone. Whatever money you make, you keep it. I mean, think about this, brother. Your house, how many times do you think it's been bought and sold? 5, 6, maybe? Just think about that. The same house is bought, and the first person bought it, paid taxes. They sold it, they paid taxes again. Then the next buyer came in, they paid taxes. They sold it, they paid taxes. Every year they kept paying taxes to own something. That's like me buying a phone and Apple saying, oh, because you're using it this year, we come to collect more taxes on that item. That's ludicrous. But all of this has been government overreach for decades. And it was all sold to the American people. Oh, it's just for a short period of time and then it'll all go away. But it never does.
Yeah, absolutely. And so here's the thing that I want to bring up with it too, is that scripturally, I believe that the government is there to serve the people.
Yes.
Not to lord over the people.
Right.
So the purpose of it is to serve the people. Obviously, there's got to be law and order. Obviously, there's got to be infrastructure. Obviously, there has to be governance in different areas, different departments. But the purpose is not to lord over the people, and at the same time, that's what we say what democracy is. But yet, when the government decides everything and the people have no choice left, that's no different from, that's not even socialism. That's gone past. Sorry, that was just that's gone past into a communist direction.
Yeah, if you think about it too, I mean, just like, for example, AOC, Alexander Cortez, she went and she was, she's a senator from New York. And here she is from New York during COVID, screaming at the people, stay home, stay safe, stay home, stay safe. Don't go out, you'll kill grandma, and masked up and all of her videos and stuff. What does she do? What does she do 3 months into the pandemic? She takes her husband and they go to Florida and they go out to restaurants and everything else, no mask. That's lording over. It's like she's preaching one gospel, if you could call it that, one message to her own people of New York, and then she lives another way. So it's for you, but not for me. You know what I mean? And that's a mindset that gets in many of these politicians. And you look at Nancy Pelosi. I mean, they have a law that they cannot get involved in promoting or suppressing a business for personal gain. Here, this woman's making 200,000 a year. She's got over 300 million in the bank. 300 million. She outperformed most traders in the stock market last year. I think she did something like 400% in her portfolio. How did she do that? She did it by, like you said, lording over by doing something very illegal that's not legal for anybody else, And so,
So the same rules that counts for the people doesn't count for the politicians.
Exactly.
And that's just common sense. Yeah.
Yep.
Yep. So I'm going to close with this, and I'm going to ask your opinion on this too, is what is our responsibility as Christians with when it comes to speaking out about, number one, Jesus in public setting. I'll use this example. Our youth pastor recently, and I mean, I knew about this. You cannot go into a public school right now, even if you work there. In fact, we have people in the congregation that works there. You cannot go in a public school. I don't know about every other state, but in Wisconsin, you cannot go in a public school without, even if you work there, even if you're an employee, and share Jesus with the kids, you can get reported and kicked out.
It's unbelievable. And the
parents take advantage of that, because a lot of the parents, of course, some of them might be atheist or, but a lot of them are Christian, and a lot of the Christians would stand up and say, well, he's from another denomination. I don't like what he's doing. And that's happened. That's happened to us. So yes. Luckily, the kids have different rights in the school system. My point about it is it's anti the First and Second Amendment. So yes. That might be the school's laws, but that's anti First and Second Amendment.
Yes. Yeah, even the children in a lot of states are not allowed to gather together to pray before school. They are not allowed to pray over their meals, any of these different things. But yet at the same time, those, again, and I hate to beat a dead horse, but many of those who scream, separation of church and state, separation of church and state. But wait a second, in Minneapolis, they just passed a law that Sharia law is welcome in this one part of Minneapolis.
But you can't proclaim Jesus.
But you can't proclaim
Jesus.
That's
not a law, that's just free speech.
And they have a call to prayer in Arabic every morning that blasts out over the city, and everybody is woken up at 5 a.m. for a call to prayer in Arabic.
So like we drive from Tomahawk to Madison sometimes to catch a flight from Madison, because Madison is a little closer than Milwaukee or Chicago. And so the airport's smaller, so it's kind of neat to do it that way. When you go through the airport, guess what they have there? A prayer station for Muslims in the middle of a tiny airport in Wisconsin, but you cannot go to a school. It's not a designated place. You understand? You're just talking with people. You're not enforcing anything. You're just having, you cannot have a conversation without getting kicked out.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. It truly is. And
I mean, we have one of the pastors in Green Bay that there was a public event at an open market for like a pride rally, right? It was a like a transgender or whatever pride rally, whatever you want to call that, at a public event. It's the same public spot, like a park where they had like farmers markets and stuff. So they had that pride rally there, and he went and evangelized there. And while he was evangelizing, the cops came and drug him out of there. It's a public event, not a private ticketed event, a public event. The cops drug him out of there. They're like, we won't have you do this.
Well, we went to, when we were in DC last week, we went to the Religious Liberties Commission. That's what we were summoned for. So this Religious Liberties Commission is President Trump has instituted this. It's designated by the Office of Faith. And he created this when he came back into office in January. This Office of Faith created this Religious Liberties Commission, and they bring religious leaders of all backgrounds, not just Christian, and there's Jewish there, and every kind of religion that you can imagine are invited. And but they bring up different topics. And so the last time they talked about religious liberties in our schools, that's the one that we went to. They had a coach that was fired and banned for life from going to the school because he prayed a 15-second prayer on the football field. And the prayer was not, in Jesus' name, taking authority over angels. The prayer was, Lord, protect our kids. Don't let anyone get hurt in the name of Jesus. Amen. Something like that. He was fired like that, and he was banned. If he ever showed up, even to get his stuff out of his desk at school, he had to have an armed guard with him, watching over him. There was a lady that was fired. She testified. I'll try to get you the footage. She was fired for having a crucifix, just having it. So other people had, the baseball teams, Yankees, and
whatever.
Whatever. They had all of these different paraphernalia, even pride things. They could have gay pride things. But the moment she had that crucifix, her school principal came to her and said, take it and hide it in your desk. I don't want to see it. Because of separation of church and state, they tried to say. And she said, no. She said, my grandmother gave it to me and she told me to never hide it. And she was fired for it, and they had to take it all the way to the Supreme Court, just like the football coach went all the way. There was 3 of them that spoke, brother. I mean, you would just weep. It sounds like a communist country, but it's this country.
So this year, the beginning of this year, we had an event, and some of the people in our church held it at a neighboring city. At a library, a public library.
Yes.
And the people, so we phoned the people. We said, we want to rent the place. We want it for, I think it was 8 weeks, 8 or 9 weeks. We want to have, let's say it was 10 weeks. We want to have every Monday night, we want to have for 1 hour, we want to rent the spot to reach out to the community, of course, for the purpose of the gospel, right? So it's not just a social event. It's for it's for the church, right? And so we want to rent it for 10 weeks because we're having this program that we're doing. And we got all the paperwork, did all the paperwork. We were there for about 3 weeks. Now, I didn't run it. One of the leaders in the congregation ran it, and they phoned me, and he said they're having a problem because they want separation of church and state, and they can't have us there because we're a church, And I said, well, one, we're not doing it permanently. Number two, we did the paperwork. And they said, yeah, but we can only have you if you're a 501c3. I said, okay, we are a 501c3. If you've asked me, I would have sent it to you. And so when we first signed up, even though we offered to pay, they said, no, you don't have to pay because that's not how the system works. So when they phoned again, they said, well, and these were Christian people that phoned, that was running the library. So it's so ingrained in some Christians that there has to be the separation between church and state. And you can't be, no church can have anything, can do anything there, nothing. And so I kind of very gently just said, listen, I've already booked it. And so I've got the paperwork. I'm not backing down. I said, if you want the money, send me the bill, we'll pay it. And I think we paid it. It wasn't about the money, but it's about the principle of like trying to kick a church out of a system because they won't have church in anything, nothing, you know. And so, and what was the scariest for me is it was Christians doing it. It wasn't, you know, it wasn't the government, but it was Christians using the rhetoric of separation of church and state. Can't have church meetings in there. Brother, the gay pride can have meetings in there.
Exactly. And
they
it's like a religion.
Everybody can have, the Muslims can go in there and do their stuff, but the Christians can't have it because there's got to be separation between church and state.
Yep.
You know, because it's a government-owned building. So,
you know, if you
but
think
it's
about
for
it,
the
like
public, brother. It's not for any, the reason we have libraries is for the public. It's not like we're having it in the library hall. There's a meeting room. You understand? The meeting rooms are for the public.
Forgive me for being a little crass, but let me just say it like this. Right now in our country, we have Veterans Day, not Veterans Month, Veterans Day. These are people that gave a limb, they gave their life, they gave their blood to protect us. They get one day. Gay pride gets a month, and it's shoved down your throat with violence. And, you know, if you think about that, you know, number one, I don't agree with the lifestyle. Okay. But number two, let me say this. Also, we preserve their right as Americans, whatever, what you do with your genitalia, I don't care. Okay. But in other words, don't force us to celebrate what you do with your genitalia. Yeah. Because there's not a straight Pride Month. Exactly. You understand? You know what I mean? And so, and if you even would, you know, mention it, you would be considered a bigot.
Yeah, then you're a bigot just because you brought it up.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And if you think about it in a crass way like that, that's what it really boils down to.
Well, and here's the thing why I brought it up is because, you know, my question is this, and I want to close with this, is what do we as Christian leaders do with this?
Yeah, we have to be more vocal.
Yeah.
And
what do we do with this?
Involved in politics. We have to get involved in these things because, you know, like I heard a woman, brother, I just wept. I was watching this TikTok and this young woman, she couldn't have been 25. And she said, I went to church, she said. Yeah, she was probably 25, 26. She said, I haven't been to church since I was 15 when I went with a friend. But when Charlie Kirk was killed, she said, I felt like I owed it to him to go to church. She said, I went and they never said a word about Jesus, about Charlie Kirk, not a word. And she said, I cried the whole time and I left. Now, here's a woman that was not saved, and she knew that was unjust. I mean, what blew my mind, brother, is I went to this, the Lord began to direct me to, and you gotta, everybody watching this, you gotta do your own study, but the book of Judges, and I'll leave it to you to close, Pastor, but in Judges, you know, you have the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible. Then Joshua comes, and then Judges. Well, Judges is 7 cycles of rebellion and repentance and revival. In the midst of this, in the midst of the rebellion and all of this stuff going on, let me see if I can find it exact for you. There's a story that will just make your heart break. And it's a story of here it is here. It's in Judges 19, but you got to read Judges 19, 20, and 21 in succession. And it's a story of a concubine. And it's a story of a man owns this concubine who worked for his family. And a stranger came through town, and he houses the stranger, and these radical homosexuals came and beat on the door and said, "We want to rape your visitor." That's what they said to the man. "We want to rape the man that is staying in your house." And the head of the house said, "Please, please do not." And foolishly, he succumbed to their pressure and gives them his virgin daughter and this concubine. And the concubine, they raped her to death. And so literally what he does is in Judges 19, he dismembers the woman, and he sends a piece of this woman to all 12 tribes of Israel. And everyone in the 12 tribes of Israel say, "What has happened to our nation?" And that's what they were sharing about, there in DC. What has happened to our country? How far have we come away from our foundations?
Yeah, it's a spiritual and a moral decay that has led everything to come to this point. And it's like you said, when do we wake up?
Yeah.
And when does preachers wake up and say something about it? Because, it's like you said, what people do in their bedroom is their business. But when they start dictating what I do and what I believe and what I stand for, that's a totally different thing.
Right. That's un-American then. And I remember in the 90s when the decay really began was with Bill Clinton. And we were warned of Bill Clinton's crazy liaisons. And I remember Bill Clinton looking at, as he was being brought before the government for lying to Congress. And they said to him, "You swore to us and to God that you did not have sex with this woman." And his response was, "That depends on your definition of sex." So that's where he started to change the definitions of things. And that's when the moral decay and the decline went down.
Started happening.
Yeah, it really happened then. And it's just been on a steep slope. And that's 30 years ago. Yeah. But
well, thank you. I appreciate your time.
Thank you for hosting
us
on
here. And I want to encourage everybody watching. Just some of you have been, obviously commenting and jumping on here and stuff. But I want to say this, as Christians and as people, as believers, if you go to a church and you're in a different city, different part of the country, and you go to a church where people don't speak about these things, get yourself another church.
Yes.
Go to another church. Quit going to the church that you're going to.
Quit feeding that.
Example, I don't know the man personally. I know who he is. I've seen a lot of his stuff on social media. I respect him. Mark Driscoll has put out a whole list of churches that do speak up for the truth, and is not lukewarm and that kind of thing. So you can search him up, Mark Driscoll.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, it's true. And I was just shocked of the amount of even spirit-filled ministers that just would not say something, and would just say something. Even if you are more left-leaning, you're more of a Democrat. Okay, whatever, fine. But this is a Christian brother, man. This is a guy winning souls, and he was murdered for preaching the truth of the God. He was just witnessing to somebody,
Yeah.
and they still will not speak about it. It's a level of callousness unprecedented in American history. And so don't let this die in your heart. Whoever's watching this, don't let this die. And
Well, and here's why I'm bringing it up. Sometimes people get this thing where God speaks to them in their hearts, and they put it off and put it off and put it off. And eventually it's like a callus, and it doesn't have an effect anymore. There's no more conviction about it. So if you felt a conviction about this, quit going where you go and find another church. If you
I
got to drive
100% agree.
further, doesn't matter. Go to the church I don't care who they are. I don't care what the denomination is. I don't care what their affiliation is. I don't care about it. You will decay in that moral state that they're in. You'll decay in that state. And if they've lost the stance for the truth, they've lost the zeal for God. It's done with. You can't, like,
just like I said, just like the book of Revelation says, God has taken their candle already from them. Their candle is
there's
already
nothing left there. Spiritually, there's nothing left there.
right.
So people's like, that's a radical stance. Well, sleeping in a garage doesn't make you a car any more than going to church makes you a Christian. So
that's right.
Yeah,
read those first 3 chapters of Revelation, and you'll see that the same moral decay got into the early church, and Jesus did not have he spoke much more plainly than even Pastor Jaco and I are saying right now. He said, I'll vomit them out of my mouth. And so, I mean, he was rough, man.
Yeah.
So
I want to encourage you with that, Tom. I appreciate it. Thank you for your time.
Love you, brother.
Bless you.